I'd like to talk about Norm MacDonald for a second. Not Norm MacDonald, Norm MacDonald. I just watched his recent special they released on Netflix. That's how he said his own name, I suppose. Norm MacDonald. And it was a beautiful thing to watch. One last gift from one of the greatest to ever do it. I love Norm so much. But it was also really bittersweet because those jokes would have done so well in front of a live audience, and he got sick and COVID hit, and he didn't die from COVID. He had cancer for 9 years without telling anybody, which is classic Norm. But COVID hit before he was able to film this final special, and then he got sick and passed away. But he had the foresight to film it in his own home, well, in his manager's house, who was his next door neighbor. And it was amazing, but man, I would have loved to see that in front of a live audience. And then he had a joke about the seat cushions on airplanes and how they float. And I had, on my first special, a joke making fun of seat cushions and how they float. He went in a different direction than me, but the whole setup was so similar. And I'm in no way insinuating that Norm stole my joke, but it kind of made me happy. I was like, I like to believe I know I learned a lot from him, and he's a big comedic inspiration for me, but for him to go down a similar path to me in that subject matter, I was like, okay, we did have similar brains. I'm not putting myself on Norm's level. I would never dare speak such blasphemy, but it was cool to see. Although, after I filmed that special, I also heard an old George Carlin bit where he had a joke about the seat cushions floating. So I guess it's not entirely new ground. But me, Norm, and George Carlin, 3 of the greats, we've all talked about it. You know, at the end of that special, they had a little bit of a round table with David Letterman, Molly Shannon, David Spade, Adam Sandler, and who am I forgetting? Letterman, Molly Shannon, David Spade, Adam Sandler. Oh, Dave Chappelle. And they were all talking. They watched the Norm special in like real time, and then when it ended, they had their instant feedback on it. And they got to talking about Norm's final performance ever, and it was like right when the pandemic hit and right before everything shut down. And they were talking about how amazing it was because you can watch it on YouTube. And they confirmed what I long believed because I was hosting that show at the Irvine Improv. And, Oxnard Improv? I think we were in Oxnard. But I hosted Norm MacDonald, one of my favorite comedians ever. I hosted his final show ever. Isn't that insane? Like, honestly, it blows my mind when I think about it. Not to overstate it. It's not like biblical or something like that. Like, it's just a coincidence. But, I mean, I loved the guy. He was one of my favorites. And then I had the honor of hosting his final show ever. And Madge came. The way it worked out, actually, I love him, and Madge loves him too. So we just went to watch him on the first night that he was performing, I think the Thursday night. And we went to watch, and they know me at that improv because I perform there regularly. So they got me and Madge a seat, and I guess Madge and I a seat. Madge and me. I mean, who cares? Was anybody picking up on the grammatical error? Anyway, we sat, watched him. They let us go backstage and talk to him, which was just beautiful. And that was all I needed. We got a picture. But then the next day, they messaged me in the morning and said the host had to back out. He had some other gig come up or something. Would I like to host the rest of the weekend? So then I got to host for him the next 2 nights. And he got there really early for the shows. Like, he was there a few hours early, and he was napping in the green room. Like, in retrospect, he was sick. I thought he had some weird ritual, and maybe he wasn't taking care of his body, and, he was just guzzling Red Bulls. And I didn't know he was sick. In retrospect, it's so clear he was, but he was there so early, and we'd get there pretty early. He'd be coming, we'd get there an hour early. He would have already been there for a couple hours, like napping in the green room, and then we hung out with him, watched him do his thing, hung out after the show. I got to spend a solid 5 or 6 hours with Norm MacDonald, and we were trying to get pregnant at the time. And I wasn't smoking weed, trying to keep those sperm healthy. And he asked me to smoke a joint, asked us to smoke a joint. And I said, no, thank you, I'm not smoking. So I could have smoked a joint with Norm, and I didn't. But that's fine. I hung out with him. Not like it would have been that much different. Who knows? Could have had some even bigger laughs, but it was just an honor to hang out with one of the greats, Norm MacDonald. The first time I ever did Conan, I actually forgot this happened, but my mom reminded me after Norm passed away. My mom came with me. I was still living in Toronto at the time, and Conan flew me out from Toronto to LA and flew my mom and I out. And then did Conan, had a fun set, just a great time in LA. Like, I was on cloud nine, on top of the world, happy with how the set went. Just feeling like things were starting to happen for me. Conan's one of my favorites of all time, too. So it was just, what a memory that is. My mom got to hang out with Conan and I backstage briefly. Conan came to say hello. And, we flew there. They had a limo pick us up in the hotel, take us to Conan. It was just cool to be able to, it was kind of the first time I was ever, able to say to my mom, hey, everything's going to be all right. This comedy thing is working out. I didn't make a terrible decision with my life. Anyway, in the airport on the way back, Norm MacDonald tweeted at me and said, hey, just wanted to say you're really funny. But this was right after I did Conan. He didn't even mention Conan. It's like a classic Norm thing, too. Hey, really, really funny stuff. I came across a YouTube video of you at an open mic at Yuck Yucks in Toronto. Really great. Keep up the good work. I just love that it was the day that my Conan set aired, and he didn't even reference Conan. It was some random YouTube video, an open mic. I'm like, no fucking way he didn't watch my Conan. There's no way the YouTube video is what made him reach out to me. Okay, so I found the exact tweet. I was able to, I don't have Twitter anymore, but I found, using the Twitter advanced search, I was able to find from December 2nd, 2014. This is the day after I did Conan. Norm said, was browsing YouTube a while ago and saw you on Yuck's open mic. Hilarious. Heard you did Conan. Fantastic. Congrats. So he did mention Conan. I remembered it incorrectly. His tweet was even sweeter than I remembered. And he had just stumbled upon my Yuck's open mic set even before I did Conan. So I'm glad that I went back and found this tweet because it's even sweeter than I remembered. Norm, what a gem. So I was on cloud nine with that. Told my mom how important that was to me. She was like, who's Norm MacDonald? I'm like, who's Norm MacDonald? So I showed her clips and everything. And a few weeks later, maybe a couple months later, he was performing in Toronto. And I said, hey, we're both, because he followed me on Twitter too. So I was like, we both follow each other. Maybe I'll ask him if I can open for him at his gig in Toronto. So I went to send him a direct message on Twitter. He wasn't following me anymore. Somehow in those 2 months or whatever it was, a month maybe, I had tweeted something that made him go, I don't want to follow this fucking guy anymore. I don't know what it was, but another classic Norm move. Gone too soon. The fact that he had cancer for 9 years and didn't tell anybody. He didn't want people to look at him differently. He didn't want it to affect how they perceived his comedy. That's how dedicated he was to his craft, that he didn't want it to affect his jokes adversely. I don't know, man. I'll take those sympathy laughs. You know what I mean? Whatever it takes. I don't care at all. I'll do anything for a good laugh. Excuse me. So, yeah, rest in peace, Norm MacDonald. I know it's been a while. I think it's over a year since he passed away. But I've never really talked about it. Not that people have been waiting on me to talk about it. But watching the new special that came out, which is called Nothing Special, just kind of brought it all back to the forefront of my mind, and I loved the guy. Even watching his show on Netflix, the way he interviews people, the genuine curiosity, his ability to be the clown, his willingness to seem like the stupid person in the room in order to make other people feel comfortable and to get the best possible laughs out of a situation. It's not as easy as he made it look. I study him, and I think he made some very conscious decisions that really profoundly... I mean, when you watch Norm Has a Show on Netflix, what he gets out of his guests. Like, I just rewatched the Jane Fonda episode, and they make out by the end of the episode. He's making out with Jane Fonda, and she's, like, falling in love with him over the course of the half hour. And he's just... He was a beautiful man. Rest in peace, Norm Macdonald. Love ya.